United Nations Human Rights Council has adopted by consensus the draft resolution presented by Algeria on the impact of anti-personnel mines on the enjoyment of all human rights on the occasion of International Day for Mine Awareness and Assistance in Mine Action. The Speaker of the National People's Assembly and Chairman of the Arab Interparliamentary Union, Brahim Boughali, has called from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, for intensifying joint Arab efforts to support the Palestinian people. At least 5 Palestinians were killed and several others wounded in new airstrikes carried out today by the Israeli occupation as Palestinian children are celebrating their day amid fear and killings. And the UN Secretary General Special Envoy for Western Sahara, Staffan de Mistura, is on a visit to the Sahrawi refugee camps as part of efforts aimed at reviving the political settlement process of the Western Sahara issue. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail from Radio Algeria International. First in our news, the President of the Republic, Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces and Minister of National Defense, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, has extended his sincere condolences to the family of the commander of the Timimoun Province military sector, Colonel Batawaf Rabi', following his death, and to the personnel of the People's National Army. The Minister of National Defense, Army General Saeed Chingriha, Chief of Staff of the National People's Army, also extended on his behalf and on behalf of all the personnel of the National People's Army his sincere condolences and deepest sympathy to the family of the deceased and his loved ones. Algeria's permanent representative to the United Nations, Ammar Benjama, has stressed that the Security Council must fully assume its responsibilities and ensure that its decisions are implemented in order to put an end to the Israeli occupation. Mariam Bershi has more details in this report.
In his address to the United Nations Security Council during its emergency meeting on Palestine at Algeria's request, Mr. Benjama stressed that the Security Council must speak out with clarity and firmness and ensure that all its decisions are implemented in order to put an end to the massacres committed by the Israeli occupation against Palestinian civilians. He recalled that the death toll of the aggression carried out against the Gaza Strip since October 7, 2023, had risen to 400 deaths among humanitarian workers, 209 journalists, and 1,060 health workers, in addition to the killing of 17,000 children, stressing that these people deserve justice. In this respect, he said that UN Resolution 2735 must be fully implemented without delay in order to save lives and put an immediate end to the Israeli aggression. Regarding the situation in the occupied West Bank, the Algerian diplomat reported an increase in the figures relating to destruction, annexations, arrests, forced displacements, and assassinations perpetrated by the Israeli occupation in an attempt to gain total control of the Palestinian territories, which Algeria strongly condemned.
And the United Nations Human Rights Council has adopted by consensus the draft resolution presented by Algeria on the impact of anti-personnel mines on the enjoyment of all human rights on the occasion of International Day for Mine Awareness and Assistance in Mine Action. Mariam Bershi reports again.
The adoption marks a significant step forward in recognizing the humanitarian, social and economic consequences of anti-personnel mines and underscores the international community's renewed commitment to victims and affected countries. The resolution, initiated by Algeria as part of its mandate in the Council for the period between 2022 to 2025, was presented as part of a trans-regional core group made up of Croatia, Mozambique, Peru, South Africa, the United Kingdom, and Vanuatu. In his statement, Algeria's permanent representative to the UN in Geneva, Rachid Bledhen, highlighted the constructive, inclusive, and transparent approach adopted throughout the consultations on this draft resolution. He emphasized that Algeria, with the support of its core group, worked to bring the Council together around this crucial issue in a spirit of cooperation and shared responsibility.
On behalf of the core group, made up of South Africa, Croatia, Mozambique, Peru, the United Kingdom, Vanuatu, and my own country, Algeria, I'm pleased to introduce draft resolution L21 entitled The Impact of Anti-Personnel Mines on the Full Enjoyment of All Human Rights. In preparing this draft resolution, the core group can proudly state that it has adopted a constructive, inclusive and transparent approach. We have held open consultations with all delegations to ensure that this initiative enjoys broad support. Our objective is to bring the Council together around this critical issue which transcends political considerations and requires collective and unified mobilization.
Mr. Bledhen emphasized that anti-personal mines have a significant impact on civilians in addition to their humanitarian, social and economic consequences on both peoples and governments.
These
weapons, which mainly affect civilians, including children, violate the most sacred rights, the right to life. They violate the right to security by creating a permanent climate of fear in the affected areas. They undermine the right to free movement by turning land, roads and villages into deadly traps. Besides direct damage, the anti-personnel mines have serious humanitarian, social and economic repercussions. They also deprive local populations of basic resources and undermine prospects for sustainable development.
Meanwhile, Algeria's permanent representative to the UN in Geneva emphasized that combating landmines is a battle for human rights, noting that the draft resolution submitted by Algeria on the impact of anti-personnel mines on the enjoyment of all human rights is a living tribute to the victims and survivors alike.
The
fight against landmines is a battle for human rights, and this objective can only be effectively achieved within a framework of international cooperation with strong political commitment and concrete actions. On the occasion of the International Day of Mine Awareness and Assistance in Mine Action, coinciding with April 4, we urge all Council members to join the consensus on this draft resolution, which we believe will be a living tribute to the victims and survivors of anti-personnel mines.
It's worth noting that the resolution calls on states, international organizations, civil society and other stakeholders to collaborate closely in sharing knowledge, information, resources and best practices in mine clearance and victim assistance. It further emphasized the importance of education and awareness raising on the risk of anti-personnel mines, particularly in affected areas, calling for the integration of mine risk education into broader education and awareness-raising programs. The resolution also requests the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights to prepare a report in consultation with states, international organizations, civil society and other relevant stakeholders to ensure comprehensive and inclusive analysis of the impact of anti-personnel mines on the enjoyment of all human rights.
And the Minister of Youth in charge of the Higher Youth Council, Mustafa Hidawi, has met with several African Union officials in charge of youth affairs during his participation in the Pan-African Youth Leadership Summit held in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. During the summit organized under the slogan Unleashing the Potential of Youth for the Prosperous Africa, Mr. Hidawi visited the AU headquarters where he met with the AU Commissioner for Health, Humanitarian Affairs and Social Development, the Director of the Women, Gender and Youth Department of the AU Commission, and the Special Envoy of the AU Secretary General for Youth. The meeting focused on how to enrich discussions, exchange experiences and establish effective partnerships that contribute to empowering youth to play an active role in building the continent's future by strengthening its spirit of innovation and leadership. In a statement on this occasion, Mr. Hidawi highlighted the efforts made by senior authorities in Algeria to support young people in the political, economic and social spheres through courageous and unprecedented measures taken by the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune.
I had the honor to represent Algeria in this exceptional international youth event, namely the Pan-African Youth Leadership Summit, organized by the Republic of Ethiopia under the aegis of the African Union Commission. I had the opportunity to expound Algeria's outstanding experience in the field of youth through the dynamic created by the Algerian high authorities' strong will, which grant utmost priority to the youth and which was reflected and embodied in several unprecedented and unusual aspects in Algeria through empowering youth in various political, economic and social fields. These efforts, and without any exaggeration, have been positively welcomed by our African brothers and have become a model to follow in the African continent. It's worth recalling that it is the second time that Algeria is invited to present its experience in empowering youth after the visit paid by our African brothers during the Pan-African Youth Summit, which took stock of the Algerian experience and the efforts deployed by the President of the Republic in favor of this important category of the society, which is the youth.
يعني الهامة في المجتمع ألا وهي الشباب.
Mr. Hidawi further stressed the commitment of the country's senior authorities to contribute to the development of strategies strengthening the role of African youth in achieving overall development and consolidating the foundations for effective leadership, paving the way for a more stable and prosperous future for the continent through the efforts of its youth. The Speaker of the National People's Assembly and Chairman of the Arab Interparliamentary Union, AIPU, Brahim Boughali, has called from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, for intensifying joint Arab efforts to support the Palestinian people. A statement from the lower house of parliament indicated that during the 150th session of the Interparliamentary Union, IPU, it was agreed to present an emergency item on behalf of the Arab group on the situation in the Palestinian territories. Mr. Boughali, who chaired the Arab group meeting on the sidelines of the 150th IPU session, praised the level of cooperation and coordination between Arab parliaments, as well as the pivotal role of Arab parliamentary diplomacy in defending Arab causes, foremost among which is the Palestinian cause. And at least 5 Palestinians were killed and several others wounded in new air strikes carried out today by the Israeli army against Gaza and Khan Yunis in the central and southern parts of the enclave. Mariam Barshi tells us more.
According to Palestinian sources, at least 86 people have been killed and scores of others wounded over the past 24 hours in the continued Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip. The Israeli occupying army resumed over 2 weeks ago its military operations in Gaza in violation of the ceasefire enforced last January, causing an unprecedented humanitarian disaster in the besieged enclave. In this connection, the representative of the State of Palestine to the UN, Riyad Mansour, stressed the necessity for the states to act individually or collectively to meet their obligations as part of the international law in a bid to save human lives in the occupied Palestinian territories. In letters sent to the UN Security General and the chairman of the UN Security Council and General Assembly, he recalled that the horrible destructions in Gaza and the nightmare imposed by the Israeli occupying authorities to the Palestinian people were in violation of human law's principles and of humanity itself. The Palestinian diplomat affirmed that the international community must adopt immediate measures to support the ceasefire calls and take concrete steps to protect the civilian population. He noted that over 1,200 civilians were killed and 3,000 others injured since the Israeli occupation resumed its bombardments of Gaza. This came as a group of independent experts urged further countries to join the so-called Group of The Hague, bringing together states with coordinate their efforts to guarantee the responsibility of Israel's violations of the international law and back the decisions adopted by both the International Court of Justice, ICJ, and the International Criminal Court, ICC. They were quoted by the news agency Wafa as saying that during this historic moment, the protection of the international human rights system required a decisive action based on principles.
Still in the Middle East region, the British State Secretary for the Middle East and North Africa, Hamish Falconer, today called on the Israeli government to respect the territorial integrity of Syria, which is confronted to continuous attacks. In a message posted on social networks, he quoted reports according to which the Israeli airstrikes have claimed civilian lives and threatened to further destabilize the country, whose stability, he stressed, is in the interest of the whole region. The UN Secretary General Special Envoy for Western Sahara, Staffan de Mistura, is on a visit to the Sahrawi refugee camps as part of efforts aimed at reviving the political settlement process of the Western Sahara issue. During his stay, the UN envoy will meet with the Sahrawi officials. The UN envoy's visit came ahead of a briefing he will made before the UN Security Council by mid-April on the latest developments in the occupied territory. The UN Secretary General Special Representative and head of the UN mission in charge of the organization of a referendum in Western Sahara, Alexander Ivanko, will also take part in the meeting. In this connection, the Polisario Front's representative to the UN and coordinator with the UN mission, Mohammed Sidi Omar, was quoted by the news agency APS as saying that the joint UN-AU settlement plan agreed on by the Polisario Front and Morocco remains the fair and realistic solution to complete Western Sahara's decolonization process. It is worth recalling that on October 31st, 2024, the UN Security Council adopted Resolution 2756, whereby the MINURSO's mandate has been extended by 1 year. Meanwhile, the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of the human rights defenders, Mary Lawlord, and other UN experts have expressed their deep concern at the repression campaign carried out by the Moroccan authorities. They expressed concern at the intimidation and pressure exerted by the Moroccan authorities on human rights defenders, militants, and journalists in retaliation for the support of the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination. And China has announced a slew of countermeasures against tariffs imposed by United States President Donald Trump, including additional tariffs of 34% on all goods and curbs on the export of some rare earths, deepening an escalating trade war. Trump on Wednesday announced that China would be hit with a 34% tariff on top of the 20% he imposed earlier this year, bringing the total new levies to 54%. On Friday, China's Ministry of Finance said the additional tariffs would be imposed from April 10. Beijing has previously imposed tariffs of 15% on imports of coal and liquefied natural gas from the U.S. in retaliation for Washington's 10% levies on Chinese goods. This came as U.S. President Donald Trump signaled openness to negotiations regarding the announced reciprocal tariffs on Thursday as U.S. stock markets nosedived on tariff shocks. Wall Street experienced its worst session since the 2020 pandemic period. U.S. President Donald Trump said that he would be open to negotiation with other countries for phenomenal offerings. His comments came after several White House officials insisted that the newly announced reciprocal tariffs were not negotiable. Meanwhile, Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell said Friday that he expects President Donald Trump's tariffs to raise inflation, but that the central bank won't move to change interest rates until it has a better picture of the impact. And as we said previously, every year on April 5th, Palestinian Children's Day is observed, highlighting the difficult conditions Palestinian children have endured due to the occupation. Since the beginning of the occupation of Palestinian territories, children have been directly targeted through various means, often without any regard for international agreements meant to protect their rights. The Israeli occupation has constantly viewed children as key targets in its broader conflict with the Palestinian people. And to find out more, let's follow this special program compiled and presented by our colleague Mariam Bershi. It will be followed by another program by our colleague Mazari Lasfar. With this, we come to the end of this news bulletin. We'll meet you again tomorrow, and thank you.
Recently, amid the ongoing aggression against Palestinians, more than 12,000 Palestinian children from Gaza have been killed in the past 6 months, as reported by the Ministry of Health. This figure is not final, as the violence continues and many are still missing under the rubble. Additionally, more than 100 children have been killed by the occupation forces in the West Bank and occupied Jerusalem since the beginning of this year. The occupation doesn't just kill children, but has also systematically detained and mistreated them for decades. Israel is the only country that regularly prosecutes between 500 and 700 Palestinian children annually in military courts that lack basic fair trial rights, as reported by Defense for Children International Palestine. For years, child detention has been a core element of Israeli policy, with the occupation using military orders and legislation to intensify its targeting of Palestinian children. Currently, more than 200 Palestinian children are imprisoned, including in facilities like Offa, Magidago and Daman. After October 7, 2023, over 500 children have been detained, a sharp increase compared to the period before this date, highlighting the occupation's use of punitive measures during conflicts. This trend was also evident following the 2015 uprising, when the number of child detainees grew. Since the beginning of the current aggression, the occupation has imposed retaliatory measures on prisoners, including isolating them from one another and from the outside world. Children led in these prisons have been subjected to severe treatment, including physical and psychological abuse and torture. Testimonies from recent released child prisoners revealed that many have faced beatings and other forms of torture, violating international laws and children's rights conventions. In addition, the occupation authorities have continued their pursuit of released prisoners, including 15 who were freed as part of a prisoner exchange last November. While 2 were released again, 13, including 5 children, remain detained, with 2 of them under arbitrary administrative detention. This form of detention is part of a broader pattern of suppression and control, as Israel uses administrative detention to imprison Palestinians without charges. There are currently more than 3,660 administrative detainees, including 41 children, many of whom have been arrested after October 7th. These children are held without their childhood stolen, deprived of education, and trapped in cells that deny them their innocence. On Palestinian Children's Day, the Palestinian Association for Prisoners' Support and Human Rights, Addameer, calls on the international community and relevant organizations to act decisively to protect Palestinian children's rights and end the crimes committed against them. Addameer urges the immediate release of Palestinian children detained by the occupation forces. The Palestinian Human Rights Organizations Council, a coalition of 11 civil society groups, urge UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, to recognize Israeli actions in Gaza as genocide, asserting that Israeli forces continue to kill Palestinians on a genocidal scale and create conditions of life unfit for human survival.
Janet is an oasis city in southeast Algeria. It is located in Elezi province, 412 kilometers from Elezi. It is inhabited by the Kel Ajer Tuareg people. It is the capital of Janet district. In the heart of the Sahara, an unworldly mountain range pierces the sky with its pillars. The Hogar Massif contrasts sharply with the volcanic and dune landscape, the very soul of the Sahara. The view from Askram, 2,600 meters, in an overwhelming sight, and the views of the great sand ergs of the Sahara. This is the land of the Tuareg people, with Janet and Tamanrasset being at the center of their culture. A desert town situated deep in the Sahara, the vast sea of dunes to the south of Janet, the camp